My name is Lorraine Maddox, and I am 73 years old. The moment I realized my husband thought time had erased his crimes, I was standing in our living room, holding a small black box in my hands, while he smiled at me like nothing in this world could touch him anymore. He was wrong. Very wrong. Because what I was holding didn't forget. And neither did I. Before I tell you how that moment happened, let me say this first. If you love deep, emotional stories about betrayal, secrets, and women who finally stand up later in life, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss stories like this. And please tell me in the comments where you're watching from, so I know who is sitting with me right now. Because when I rewound the evidence the next day, everything my husband tried to bury came back to life. The shocking moment came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. My husband, Earl Maddox, was sitting in his favorite chair, feet up, TV on low. He looked relaxed, confident, safe. That smile on his face was the same one he wore for years. The smile that said, "It's over. You waited too long." I stood across from him, my heart beating so loud I thought he might hear it. "Lorraine," he said casually, "what are you standing there for?" I didn't answer. Instead, I placed the small black box on the coffee table. His eyes flicked down for half a second, then back up. "What's that?" he asked. I smiled. "It's time," I said. That's when his smile finally disappeared. But the story didn't start there. It started decades earlier, when he learned that waiting people out was his favorite weapon. After that moment, before I go any further, let me take you back. Back to the beginning. Back to the man who believed time could clean blood off paper and silence off tape. I met Earl when I was 21. He was charming, funny, always had a story to tell. People liked him right away. He shook hands strong, looked you in the eye, made you feel chosen. I thought that meant something. We married young. I trusted fast. That was my first mistake. At first, life looked normal. Bills were paid. Food was on the table. Neighbors waved. But there were small things. Things I noticed but didn't name. Earl never liked paper trails. He hated cameras. He hated recordings. "People don't need proof," he used to say. "They need trust." I believed him. Years passed. Children grew up. People moved on. And things happened. Bad things. Things Earl always said would go away with time. And for a long time, it looked like they did. One night, many years ago, I asked him a question. "Earl," I said softly, "what really happened back then?" He didn't look at me. "That was a long time ago," he replied. "Why dig it up?" That was his answer to everything. Why dig it up? Why bring it back? Why stir old trouble? Because time had been kind to him. Or so he thought. The truth is, I didn't forget. I just waited. Because when you're married to a man like Earl, you learn something important. He talks himself into believing he's safe. And when people feel safe, they get careless. Over the years, I started collecting things. Quietly. Not like a detective. Like a woman who learned to listen. Old receipts. Letters. Voice messages. A broken tape recorder he forgot about. A camcorder from the 90s, no one thought still worked. Evidence doesn't shout. It waits. I hid it all in a place Earl never checked. Because men like him believe women don't plan. They believe we forget. They believe we forgive by default. The night everything changed, we had company. Old friends. People who hadn't seen us in years. Someone laughed and said, "Earl, remember that mess from back then?" Earl waved it off. "That," he chuckled, "that's ancient history." Ancient history. I watched his face. So sure. So smug. So convinced time had washed him clean. That's when I knew. He believed he had won. Later that night, when everyone left, Earl leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Feels good to be past all that," he said. I looked at him. "Does it?" I asked. He smiled. "Time fixes everything," he said. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said, "time shows everything." He laughed. I didn't. That night, I went into the spare room. I opened the old cabinet. I touched the box I hadn't opened in years. My hands were steady. My heart was not. Inside was the proof he thought no longer mattered. And that's when I made my decision. Tomorrow, I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't accuse. I wouldn't beg. I would rewind. The next morning, Earl woke up happy. He whistled while making coffee. He kissed my cheek. "Morning, babe," he said. I smiled back. "Morning," I replied. He had no idea. After breakfast, I asked him to sit down. "I found something," I said. He laughed lightly. "You always find old junk," he said. I went to the closet. I brought out the black box. The same one, now sitting on the table. "What's that?" he asked again. I looked him straight in the eyes. "It's your past," I said, still breathing. His face tightened. "You're being dramatic," he said. I pressed a button. Click. And just like that, time stopped protecting him. But what played next was something even I wasn't fully prepared for. Because once the evidence started speaking, it didn't stop where I thought it would. And the truth I uncovered next would change everything I believed about my marriage. The room went very quiet after I pressed play. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The dangerous kind. The kind that makes your ears ring and your heart race. From the small speaker, inside that black box came a voice. His voice. Younger, sharper, angry. Earl's smile vanished so fast it was like it had never been there. "What is this?" he snapped, reaching for the box. I pulled it back just in time. "Sit," I said. My voice surprised even me. It was steady. Commanding. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. The recording crackled, old and worn, but the words were clear. "Nobody will believe her," Earl's voice said on the tape. "Time will handle it. It always does." Earl stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. "That's not real," he said. "That's fake." I didn't respond. I turned the volume up. The tape continued. Another voice joined his. A man. Laughing. "You sure this won't come back on you?" "Please," Earl replied. "By the time anyone asks questions, we'll all be old or dead." My hands trembled. I hadn't remembered that part. Earl's face went pale. "You've been spying on me," he shouted. I finally looked up at him. "I've been surviving you," I said. He paced the room like a trapped animal. "You don't understand what you're messing with," he warned. I paused the recording. "Oh, I understand," I replied. "You thought time would erase this." He scoffed. "It almost did," he said. "You waited too long." That sentence burned. Too long. Like there was an expiration date on truth. I pressed play again. This time, the voice on the tape was calmer. "Colder. If anyone asks," Earl said. "We deny everything. No proof, no case." Earl lunged for the box again. I stood up. "Don't," I said. He froze. For the first time in our marriage. He listened. "You kept this?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I replied. "For how long?" he demanded. I thought for a moment. "Long enough to know you'd forget," I said. He laughed nervously. "You think this means something now?" he asked. "We're old. Nobody cares anymore." I looked at him with a sadness that surprised me. "That's where you're wrong," I said. "I care." I stopped the tape and set the box down gently. "That's only one piece," I added. His head snapped up. "One," he repeated. I nodded. There are letters, photos, dates, names. His breathing changed. Shall. Vast. You wouldn't, he said. I already did, I replied. He ran his hands through his hair. Lorraine, he said, trying a softer tone. That was a lifetime ago. A lifetime I lived, I said, while you pretended it never happened. You were happy, he insisted. I laughed. I was quiet, I corrected. There's a difference. I walked to the cabinet and pulled out another item. An old envelope. Yellowed. Fragile. What's that? He asked. A letter you wrote, I said. He shook his head. No, he said, I burned those. You burned the ones you remembered, I replied. I opened it carefully and read aloud. If she keeps talking, things could get ugly. We can't let that happen. Earl sank onto the couch. His shoulders slumped. For the first time, he looked afraid. You promised me you'd forgotten, he whispered. I stopped. That sentence landed hard. I never promised that, I said. You assumed it. He looked up at me. You waited, he accused. You planned this. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said, because waiting was the only safe thing I could do. He stared at the floor. You could ruin me, he muttered. I tilted my head. You ruined others, I said quietly. They just didn't get to speak. Silence filled the room again. Thick. Heavy. Then Earl said something that made my stomach turn. No one will believe you, he said. They never did. I walked closer. Maybe, I replied, but the evidence will. He laughed bitterly. You think paper and tape beat time? He asked. I met his eyes. They beat lies, I said. I turned the box off. Not because I was done. Because I wanted him to sit with it. You always said time erased things, I continued. But time doesn't erase, it reveals. He shook his head slowly. You're not the woman I married, he said. I nodded. You're right, I replied. She didn't know the truth yet. That night, Earl didn't sleep. Neither did I. But for the first time, my sleeplessness felt different. Not anxious. Prepared. Because now he knew. And when liars know they've been seen, they panic. The next morning, Earl tried a new tactic. He made breakfast. He smiled. He kissed my cheek. Let's not do something we can't take back, he said. I sipped my coffee calmly. It's already been taken back, I replied. What? He asked. Time, I said. I took it back. He leaned closer. What do you want? He asked. I looked at him. I want you to stop pretending, I said. He laughed softly. That'll never happen, he replied. I smiled. Then neither will my silence. That afternoon, I left the house with my purse and my notebook. Earl watched me from the window. Where are you going? He called out. To make copies, I said. His face drained of color. As I walked down the driveway, I felt something strange. Not fear. Not anger. Momentum. Because once evidence is rewound, it doesn't stay in one room. And by the time I came back, Earl's past would no longer belong only to us. The air outside felt different the moment I stepped off the porch. Sharper. Colder. Honest. I stood at the end of the driveway for a second and looked back at the house I had lived in for more than 40 years. From the outside, it still looked peaceful. Curtains neat, lawn trimmed, windows clean. A good man's house. That was the lie Earl loved the most. I turned away and walked to my car. I didn't drive fast. I didn't rush. I needed my hands steady and my head clear. The black box sat on the passenger seat, wrapped in a plain brown towel. My notebook rested beside it, heavy with dates and names I had written down over the years. Every stoplight felt like a test of my courage. You can still turn back, a small voice whispered. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. No, I said out loud. I already waited long enough. The first place I went was the old records office downtown. A small building with chipped paint and slow ceiling fans. The kind of place where paper lived longer than people. I had been there before, years ago, when Earl needed something filed. He had made me wait in the hallway that time. This time, I walked in alone. A woman behind the counter looked up. Yes, ma'am, she asked. My name is Lorraine Maddox, I said. I need copies of old records. She nodded, unfazed. What year? She asked. I swallowed. 1992, I said, and 93. Her eyebrows lifted just a little. That's a while back, she said. I know, I replied. That's the point. While she searched, I sat on a hard plastic chair and listened to the fan click overhead. My heart beat slow and loud. Every sound felt too big. I remembered Earl's voice. Time fixes everything. But here I was, watching time open its drawers without complaint. When the clerk returned, she carried a thin folder. These are what we have, she said. Incident reports, statements. I took the folder with shaking hands. Inside were words I had not seen in decades. Dates. Descriptions. Names. Earl's name. Not smiling. Not charming. Written in black ink that did not fade. I closed the folder and nodded. Thank you, I said. She looked at me kindly. Take care, she replied. I almost cried right there. Next, I drove to the library. Not the front desk. The back room. The place with microfilm and old newspapers. The librarian, an older man with glasses low on his nose, listened as I explained. I need help finding articles from the early 90s, I said. Local ones. He didn't ask why. He just pointed. Machines are over there, he said. Let me know if you need help. I sat hunched over the screen, rolling film slowly. Page after page flickered past. Church events. Birth announcements. Sports scores. Then, there it was. A small article. Easy to miss. Local man questioned an incident. My hands shook. I leaned closer. Earl's name again. Different spelling. Same man. The article was short. Careful. It talked about questions. About investigations. About no charges due to lack of evidence. Lack of evidence. I swallowed hard. You thought you won, I whispered. I printed everything. Articles. Reports. Notes. When I finally stood up, my legs felt weak. But my mind felt sharp. My phone buzzed. Earl. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. I silenced it. For once, he would wait. The last stop was the copy shop. Bright lights, loud machines. A young man at the counter smiled. How many copies? He asked. All of them, I said. He looked surprised. I smiled back. Trust me, I added. I'll need them. As the machine hummed, I opened the black box one more time. I listened to the tape again, headphones pressed tight against my ears. Earl's voice sounded younger. Crueler. Confident. If we stay quiet, it'll disappear. I paused the tape. You were wrong, I said softly. By the time I left the shop, the sun was low. My arms ached from carrying paper. My head ached from memory. But my fear was quieter than it had ever been. When I pulled into the driveway, Earl was standing outside. Waiting. His arms were crossed. His jaw tight. You went out, he said flatly. Yes, I replied, stepping out of the car. With that, he asked, nodding at my bag. Yes, I said again. He moved closer. You're making a mistake, he warned. I met his eyes. No, I said, I'm correcting one. He reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Don't," I said. He froze. "You don't get to touch me when you're scared," I added. His face twisted. "You think those papers mean something," he snapped. I opened my bag and pulled out one copy. I held it up. "They mean time didn't erase you," I said. "It exposed you." He laughed, sharp and empty. "You're too late," he said. "Nobody cares anymore." I closed the bag. "Then why are you shaking?" I asked. He went silent. That night, Earl didn't speak to me. He paced. He muttered. He drank. I sat at the table, sorting papers into neat piles. Every stack felt like a step forward. Before bed, I locked the spare room door. Not out of fear. Out of choice. I placed the black box and my notebook beside me and lay down fully dressed. My heart was still racing. But underneath, it was something new. Certainty. Because the evidence was no longer hidden. It had left the house. And tomorrow, it would reach people Earl never expected. People who remembered. People who wrote things down. People who did not forget just because he told them to. And once that happened, time would stop protecting him completely. The first call I made the next morning was the hardest one. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what I would hear. I sat at the kitchen table, the papers stacked neatly in front of me, the black box resting on top like it was watching. Earl was still asleep on the couch. His snores came in short, uneven bursts. Even in sleep, he sounded nervous. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It rang twice. Then, "Hello," a woman's voice answered. Older now, slower but unmistakable. "This is Lorraine Maddox," I said. "You may not remember me." There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "I remember," she said quietly. My chest tightened. "I need to talk to you," I continued, "about what happened back then." Another pause. Longer this time. "I always wondered when you'd call," she said. Her name was Martha Keene. She had lived 2 streets over in the early 90s. We weren't friends, not really, just neighbors, church smiles, polite waves. Until the year everything happened. Until Earl's name began to move through whispers. Until Martha stopped coming outside. Until people stopped asking questions. We met that afternoon at a small cafe near the park. Neutral ground. Safe. Martha sat stiffly across from me, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. "You look the same," she said. I smiled faintly. "You don't," I replied honestly. "You look tired." She laughed softly. "That never goes away," she said. I didn't ease into it. I placed the copies on the table between us. "I kept things," I said. "You weren't the only one." Her eyes dropped to the papers. Then widened. "You found it," she whispered. "I rewound it," I replied. She swallowed hard. "You know," she said slowly, "he thought no one would ever bring it up again." "I know," I said. "He told me." Her hands began to shake. "He said time would erase it," she continued. "That people forget." I leaned forward. "Did you forget?" I asked. She looked up at me, eyes wet. "Not a day," she said. She told me things I had never heard. About meetings that never went anywhere. About statements that vanished. About men who smiled and said, "It's best to let this go." "You were quiet," she said suddenly, looking at me. "I thought you didn't care." The words stung. "I didn't know," I said softly, "and when I did, I wasn't safe to speak." She nodded. "I understand that now," she said. We sat there in silence, the truth breathing between us. Before we left, Martha reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "If you're doing this," she said, "you're not alone anymore." I nodded. "That's why I came," I replied. The second person I contacted lived farther away. A retired clerk. A man named Howard Price. He had worked in the records office decades ago. I found his name in my notebook, written carefully with a question mark beside it. He answered on the third ring. "Yes," he said. "Mr. Price," I said. "You don't know me, but you handled paperwork in '92. There was silence. Then, "I know exactly who you are," he said. I closed my eyes. He agreed to meet. At his house. He walked slowly, leaned on a cane, but his eyes were sharp. "You kept copies," he said as soon as I sat down. "Yes," I replied. "So did I," he said. My heart skipped. He went into another room and came back with a thin folder. "These were supposed to disappear," he said. "They didn't." Inside were stamped forms. Notes in the margins. One word circled in red. "Delay." "He kept asking for time," Howard said. "Said things would calm down." "Did they?" I asked. Howard shook his head. "They never do," he replied. By the time I got home that evening, my hands were full again. More papers. More proof. More voices. Earl was awake now, packing. "You've been busy," he said. "Yes," I replied, setting my bag down. He watched me unload the papers onto the table. "You went digging," he accused. "I went remembering," I said. "You think this makes you righteous?" he sneered. I looked at him calmly. "No," I said, "it makes me responsible." That night, the phone rang again. And again. People Earl had trusted. People he had counted on forgetting. They hadn't. They had just been waiting for someone to start. I heard him on the phone later, whispering angrily. "She's dredging things up. It was handled. No one cares anymore." I smiled sadly in the dark. He still didn't understand. Because the people I had spoken to didn't care about revenge. They cared about truth. About finally being seen. And once truth starts moving through people who were silenced, it doesn't slow down. Before bed, I added new names to my notebook. New dates. New connections. The picture was bigger now. Wider. Earl's crimes weren't just moments. They were patterns. Carefully hidden. Carefully timed. As I turned off the light, I felt something shift inside me again. Not fear. Not anger. Resolve. Because tomorrow, I would take the evidence somewhere Earl never expected. A place where time meant nothing. And records never forgot. And once I did that, there would be no rewinding it back. The building was older than both of us. That's what I thought as I stood across the street, staring at it. Gray stone, tall windows, heavy doors that had opened and closed for generations. The kind of place where voices stayed trapped in the walls long after people left. Earl always said this place didn't matter anymore. "That's all sealed," he once told me with a careless wave of his hand. Buried by time. He was wrong. This was the one place time did not protect anyone. I crossed the street slowly, my bag heavy against my shoulder. Inside it were copies. Dates. Statements. Old reports. New confirmations. In the black box. The door creaked when I pushed it open. That sound alone felt like a warning. Or a promise. A woman sat behind the front desk, glasses low on her nose, typing slowly. "Can I help you?" she asked without looking up. "Yes," I said. "I need to speak to someone about old records." She looked up then. "How old?" she asked. I swallowed. "Old enough that someone thought they disappeared," I said. Her expression changed, just slightly. "Have a seat," she replied. "I'll see who's available." While I waited, I studied the room. Walls lined with plaques. Framed photos of people who once believed they were untouchable. Every one of them had believed time would save them too. It never did. A man in a dark sweater appeared and called my name. Mrs. Maddox, he said. Yes, I replied, standing. I'm Mr. Reynolds, he said. Come with me. His office was small but neat. He gestured for me to sit. What brings you here today? He asked. I didn't hesitate. I'm here because my husband thought waiting long enough erased what he did, I said, and I can prove it didn't. I placed the bag on the desk. Slowly, deliberately, I opened it and laid everything out. The papers, the copies, the notes, the old reports, and finally, the black box. Mr. Reynolds raised his eyebrows. That's thorough, he said. I had decades, I replied. He went through the papers carefully. He didn't rush, didn't interrupt. When he reached the older reports, he leaned back in his chair. These cases were never closed, he said slowly. My heart jumped. They were, I asked. He shook his head. They were delayed, he said. There's a difference. I thought of Howard's red-circled word. Delay. He looked at me. Why now? He asked. I met his eyes. Because silence has an expiration date, I said. He nodded. That's true, he said quietly. Then he reached for the black box. May I? He asked. Yes, I replied. He pressed play. Earl's voice filled the room again. Cold, certain, confident. Mr. Reynolds stopped the recording halfway through. Did he know this existed? He asked. He thought time erased it, I replied. Mr. Reynolds leaned back slowly. It didn't, he said. He stood up and went to the door. I need to bring someone else in, he said. When he returned, he wasn't alone. An older woman with sharp eyes joined us. She introduced herself as Miss Carter. She looked at the papers, then at me, then at the black box. You're very brave, she said. I shook my head. I'm very tired, I replied. She nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. They spoke quietly to each other for a few minutes. Legal words. Careful phrases. Finally, Miss Carter turned to me. Mrs. Maddox, she said, this evidence matters. My breath caught. You mean even now? I asked. Especially now, she replied. I sat back in my chair, feeling something loosen in my chest. Not relief. Validation. After decades of being told it was too late, someone was telling me it was. Your husband believed time erased responsibility, Mr. Reynolds said. But time only makes patterns clearer. Miss Carter nodded. And patterns, she added, are very hard to ignore. I gathered my things when we were done. What happens next? I asked. Mr. Reynolds met my eyes. Now, he said, we begin asking questions again. I nodded. That was all I had wanted. When I got home, Earl was waiting. He stood in the living room, stiff and pale. You went somewhere, he said. Yes, I replied. Where? He asked sharply. I set my bag down. To the place you thought forgot you, I said. His face drained of color. You wouldn't, he whispered. I already did, I replied. He stepped closer. You're digging up ghosts, he warned. I looked at him calmly. No, I said, I'm letting them speak. That night, Earl barely slept. Neither did I. But my sleeplessness felt different now. It felt finished with fear. Because the evidence was no longer just mine. It was in hands that remembered. Hands that recorded. Hands that did not erase just because a man waited long enough. As I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, one thought repeated in my mind. He thought time erased his crimes. Tomorrow, he would learn time had been keeping score. And what would happen next would be louder than anything I had done so far. The first consequence did not arrive with sirens. It arrived with a letter. White envelope. Official seal. Earl's name typed neatly on the front. I found it in the mailbox just after sunrise. I stood there for a long moment, the cool air brushing my face, the weight of that envelope pressing into my palm like it already knew what it carried. Inside the house, Earl was packing. I could hear his footsteps through the door. Back and forth. Back and forth. He knew. I walked inside and set the mail on the table. Earl stopped packing when he saw the envelope. "Is that for me?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes," I replied. He didn't reach for it. He just stared. "Who's it from?" he asked. "The place you said didn't remember," I said calmly. His throat worked. "That doesn't mean anything," he muttered. I slid the envelope closer to him. "Open it," I said. His hands shook as he tore it open. He read the first line. Then the second. By the third, he had to sit down. "What is this?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The letter explained everything. A request for information. A notice of review. A date. Not an accusation. Not yet. But a door reopening. "They can't do this," Earl said, his voice rising. "It's been too long." I leaned against the counter. "They can ask questions," I replied. "Time doesn't stop that." He crumpled the letter in his fist. "You did this," he snapped. I nodded. "Yes," I said, "I did." He stood up suddenly and pointed at me. "You want to destroy me," he said. I looked at him carefully. "No," I replied. "I want the truth to stand without me holding it." "You could have kept quiet," he said bitterly. "I did," I replied, "for decades." That shut him up. By midday, the phone started ringing. Not mine. His. He answered once. Twice. Then stopped. I watched his confidence drain with every unanswered call. The man who once believed time had buried everything was now realizing something else. Time had only waited for witnesses to grow brave. That afternoon, another letter arrived. Then another. Requests. Appointments. Questions. Earl's hands trembled as he lined them up on the table. "They're reopening things," he whispered. "Yes," I replied. "They can't prove anything," he said, desperate now. "People forget." I met his eyes. "Evidence remembers," I said. He sank into his chair. For the first time since I had known him, Earl looked small. Not powerful. Not clever. Small. "You ruined everything," he whispered. I felt a flicker of something in my chest. Not guilt. Grief. For the man I thought I married. For the life I believed was real. But grief did not change my resolve. "You ruined it when you chose silence over truth," I said gently. That evening, someone knocked on the door. Firm. Professional. Earl froze. I walked to the door and opened it. Two people stood there. Polite, serious. They introduced themselves calmly. Earl sat down slowly, like his legs no longer trusted him. I watched from the kitchen as they spoke. I did not interrupt. I did not explain. I did not rescue. For once, he spoke for himself. And for once, his words did not protect him. When they left, the house felt colder. Earl rubbed his face. "They're coming back," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "For how long?" he asked. "As long as it takes," I said. That night, Earl did not sleep. He sat in the dark, staring at nothing. At some point, he spoke. "You waited me out," he said. I turned toward him. "No," I replied. "I waited for myself." He laughed softly. "You think this makes you strong," he said. I shook my head. "This makes me finished being afraid," I replied. The next morning, Earl tried to leave early. He grabbed his jacket, his keys. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Out," he said. "I need air." I nodded. Be back, he added. I looked at him steadily. That's your choice now, I said. He hesitated at the door, then left. Hours passed. The house stayed quiet. I sat at the table, organizing my notebook again. Adding dates. Adding names. Adding notes from yesterday. The story was clearer now. What once felt scattered now made sense. Patterns always do when you stop looking away. By evening, Earl returned. He looked exhausted. They're talking to people, he said. Yes, I replied. They're asking about old things, he continued. Yes, I said again. He dropped his keys on the table. They're asking about me, he finished. I looked up. That's what accountability sounds like, I said. He stared at me like he wanted to say something else. Like he wanted to beg. But he didn't. Because he knew. Begging wouldn't rewind this. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My heart felt heavy, but steady. I realized something important. I was no longer chasing the truth. The truth was walking on its own now. And Earl was running out of places to hide. Because tomorrow, someone else would come forward. Someone whose voice had been missing all along. And when they spoke, time would officially lose its last excuse. The phone rang just after noon. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a cup, when I heard it echo through the house. The sound made my chest tighten, not with fear, but with knowing. I wiped my hands on a towel and answered. Lorraine Maddox, a woman asked. Yes, I replied. There was a pause, a deep breath. My name is Evelyn Grant, she said. You don't know me, but I know your husband. My fingers tightened around the phone. I think it's time we talked, she added. We met that afternoon at a small community center on the edge of town. Neutral, public, safe. Evelyn was already there when I arrived. She stood up when she saw me, tall, older than I expected, her face lined not just with age, but with memory. I've waited a long time for this moment, she said quietly. So have I replied. We sat across from each other at a long table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope. I kept this, she said. I almost threw it away 100 times. She slid it toward me. Inside was a letter. Dated decades ago. Signed by Earl. My hands trembled as I read. If you keep pushing, you'll regret it. People don't want to hear this anymore. Time is on my side. I closed my eyes. He had written it. Black ink, no hesitation. I was young, Evelyn said. Scared, nobody believed me. I looked up. I believe you, I said. Her eyes filled with tears. That's all I ever wanted, she whispered. She told me her story slowly. Carefully. About speaking up. About being doubted. About being told to let it go. He said the same thing every time, she said. That if I waited long enough, it wouldn't matter. I felt a cold calm settle over me. He said that to me too, I replied. Evelyn leaned forward. When I heard they were asking questions again, she said, I knew I couldn't stay silent. I nodded. Neither could I said. She reached for my hand. We're not late, she said firmly. We're right on time. When I returned home, Earl was in the living room. He looked up the moment I walked in. You went out again, he said. Yes, I replied. Who? He asked sharply. I set my bag down. Someone who remembers, I said. His face tightened. You're dragging strangers into this, he snapped. No, I replied. You dragged them in years ago. He stood up packing. They're lying, he said. They always lie. I met his eyes. They're consistent, I said. That's what scares you. He stopped packing. You don't know what you're doing, he said. I know exactly what I'm doing, I replied. I'm making sure the truth isn't alone anymore. That night, Earl didn't speak. He sat in the dark, staring at the wall. For the first time, he didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He didn't laugh. Because now, the story wasn't just mine. It wasn't even his. It belonged to the people he thought time had erased. As I lay in bed, I thought about Evelyn's words. We're right on time. Tomorrow, the truth would take another step forward. And with every voice that joined it, time lost another place to hide. The room they put us in was not large. Plain walls. Long table. A clock that ticked too loudly. It wasn't a courtroom, not yet. It was something quieter. More dangerous. A place where stories were lined up side by side to see if they matched. I sat at one end of the table with my notebook in front of me. Across the room, Earl sat stiffly, his hands folded so tightly his knuckles were white. Two officials sat between us. One man, one woman, both calm, both alert. They were not here to argue. They were here to listen. The woman spoke first. "Mrs. Maddox," she said gently, "we've reviewed the materials you brought in. Today, we need you to walk us through the timeline in your own words." I nodded. "I can do that," I said. Earl shifted in his chair. "You don't need to dramatize," he muttered. The man looked at him sharply. "Mr. Maddox," he said, "this is not the time for commentary." Earl went quiet. I began at the beginning. Not with anger. Not with accusation. With dates. Years. Places. Names. I spoke slowly, making sure each word landed where it belonged. "When I first noticed the recordings," I said, "it was because my husband hated being recorded. He always said it caused trouble." The woman nodded, writing. "And yet," I continued, "he recorded himself." I reached into my bag and placed the black box on the table. "I didn't create this," I said. "I preserved it." The man pressed play. Earl's voice filled the room. Clear. Cold. Confident. "If we stay quiet long enough, it'll disappear." Earl's head dropped. The woman paused the recording. "Mr. Maddox," she said, "is this your voice?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes," he said quietly. Next came the papers. The man laid them out one by one. Reports. Articles. Letters. Each document matched the next. Different sources. Same story. "This letter," the woman said, holding one up, "was written by you, Mr. Maddox." Earl stared at it. "Yes," he whispered. "And this report," the man added, "references the same incident, same date, same location." Earl said nothing. Then the door opened. I felt my breath catch. Evelyn Grant walked in. She did not look at Earl. She looked at me and nodded. The woman gestured for her to sit. "Ms. Grant," she said, "thank you for coming." Evelyn's voice was steady. "I've waited a long time to say this in a room where someone writes it down," she said. Earl flinched. Evelyn told her story. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But clearly. She told them what happened. What she reported. What was dismissed. "I was told," she said, "that time would take care of it." The man leaned forward. "And did it?" he asked. Evelyn shook her head. "No," she said, "time just made it quieter." The officials exchanged a look. Then the woman spoke. "Mrs. Maddox," she said, "you mentioned another individual earlier, Martha Keene." "Yes," I replied. "We spoke with her this morning," the woman said. My heart skipped. "And her account aligns," she continued, "with dates, language, behavior." Earl let out a small, broken sound. The man closed the folder. "This is no longer a single accusation," he said calmly. "This is a pattern." The word hung in the air. Pattern. That was the word Earl had spent his life running from. Earl finally spoke. "This was a long time ago," he said weakly. "People change." The woman looked at him steadily. "People do," she said. "Patterns don't unless they're confronted." Earl's shoulders sagged. The man stood. "We will be reopening this fully," he said. "Statements will be taken, evidence logged, next steps initiated." Earl looked at me then. Not angry. Afraid. "You did this," he said. I met his eyes. "No," I replied softly. "I stopped protecting you from it." When the meeting ended, I felt drained. But not empty. Outside, the air felt lighter. Evelyn stood beside me on the steps. "Thank you," she said, "for not letting time erase me." I squeezed her hand. "It didn't erase any of us," I said. "It just waited." Earl walked past us without a word. No smile. No confidence. No armor. Just a man finally standing in the open. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something important. The evidence was no longer just rewound. It was recorded again. In new ink. New files. New voices. And tomorrow, the consequences would stop being quiet. Because once a pattern is seen, it cannot be unseen. The morning, everything became public, did not begin with shouting. It began with quiet. The kind of quiet that feels too wide, like something is holding its breath. I woke up before dawn, as I had every day since the evidence left the house. I sat on the edge of the bed, my feet flat on the floor, my hands resting on my knees. For a long moment, I just listened. No packing from Earl. No muttering. No phone calls. Just silence. It felt like the pause before a wave breaks. In the kitchen, I poured myself a cup of coffee and stared out the window. The sky was pale gray, not yet decided on a color. I thought about how many mornings I had stood in the same spot, doing the same thing, believing my life was simple because it was quiet. I understood now. Quiet can hide many things. At exactly 7:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message. Not from Earl. From an unknown number. "Mrs. Maddox, this is Investigator Nolan. We need to inform you that the review has moved forward to public record." I read it twice. Then a third time. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with weight. This was it. The moment when the truth stopped being held in private rooms and careful offices. The moment it stepped outside. Earl appeared in the doorway, already dressed. He looked smaller than he used to. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from a lack of sleep. "You heard," he said. "Yes," I replied. "So it's really happening," he muttered. I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Yes," I said again. He sat down heavily at the table. "They're going to talk," he said. "People are going to talk." I nodded. "That's what happens when silence breaks," I replied. He rubbed his face with both hands. "You don't know what this will do," he said. "To our name, to our family." I looked at him steadily. "You didn't worry about that when you were hurting people," I said. "Why worry now?" He flinched. By mid-morning, the phone began to ring. This time, it was my phone. The first call was from a reporter. "Mrs. Maddox," a woman said, "we're following up on newly reopened records involving your husband. Would you like to comment?" My hand shook slightly, but my voice did not. "No," I said. "The records speak for themselves." She paused. "Is there anything you'd like people to understand?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "Yes," I said. "Time does not erase harm. It just delays accountability." She thanked me and hung up. The second call came from a neighbor. Then another. Then another. Some were supportive. Some were confused. Some just wanted to know if the rumors were true. I answered calmly. "Yes," I said. "Yes. Yes." Each time, it got easier. Earl sat in the living room, staring at the television. The news was on. His name had not been said yet, but the story was building. Words like reopened, historical, and new evidence scrolled across the screen. He turned to me. "You could still say something," he said. "You could soften this." I shook my head. "No," I replied. "I'm done editing reality for you." Around noon, someone knocked on the door. Not aggressively. Not gently. Firmly. I opened it to find a woman and a man standing there, both holding notebooks. "Mrs. Maddox?" the woman asked. "Yes," I replied. "We're here to ask a few questions," she said. Earl stood up behind me. "You don't have to talk to them," he said sharply. I turned around. "Yes," I said, "I do." We sat at the dining table. The same table where lies had been served like everyday meals. The reporters asked careful questions. About dates. About what I knew. About when I knew it. I answered honestly. "I didn't always understand," I said, "but I always remembered." One of them asked quietly, "Why now?" I folded my hands. "Because silence has protected the wrong people for too long," I said. They wrote that down. When they left, Earl exploded. "You've ruined me," he shouted. I stood slowly. "No," I said. "I removed the cover." "You wanted this," he accused. "You enjoyed it." I looked at him with tired eyes. "No," I replied. "I endured it." He paced the room like a trapped animal. "Do you know what they'll say about me?" he demanded. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "They'll say what you did." He stopped packing. "You think you're innocent in all this," he snapped. I met his eyes. "I think I survived long enough to tell the truth," I said. That afternoon, Evelyn called me. "They contacted me," she said. I closed my eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "Scared but okay." "They'll ask hard questions," I warned. She laughed softly. "They already did," she said, and I answered. My throat tightened. "I'm proud of you," I said. "So am I," she replied, for the first time. By evening, the story had spread. Not wildly. Not dramatically. But steadily. Like water finding cracks. People Earl once trusted stopped calling him. Organizations quietly removed his name. Old friends went silent. He noticed. I could see it in the way he checked his phone again and again. Nothing. That night, the news finally said his name. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Factually. I watched from the kitchen as the words appeared on the screen. Earl Maddox. Reopened investigation. Historical evidence. Earl sank into the couch. "This can't be happening," he whispered. "It already is," I replied. He turned to me then, eyes wet. "You're cold," he said. "How can you be so calm?" I thought about it. "I cried for years in silence," I said. "This is what calm looks like after that." He said nothing. Later, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed again. A message from Martha. "I saw the news. Thank you for not letting us disappear." Tears slid down my temples into my hair. I typed back. "You were never gone." As sleep finally came, one truth settled deep in my chest. The world now knew what Earl had counted on time to erase. But exposure was not the end. It was only the doorway. Because tomorrow, I would have to decide something even harder than telling the truth. I would have to decide what justice meant to me, and whether I was ready to let go of anger, or carry it forward. The morning after the world learned his name, I woke up lighter. Not happy. Not relieved. Just lighter. Like I had set down a heavy bag I didn't even realize I had been carrying for decades. I sat up slowly in bed and placed my feet on the floor. The house was quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet. Not the tense silence of secrets, not the fearful silence of waiting. It was the quiet of truth settling, where lies used to live. Earl did not sleep. I knew that without asking. I could hear him moving in the living room all night, sitting down, standing up, packing, stopping, starting again. Every sound reminded me of how many nights I had been the one lying awake, wondering, doubting, questioning myself. Now the roles had changed. And for the first time, I did not rush to comfort him. When I walked into the kitchen, he was sitting at the table, staring at nothing. The TV was off. His phone lay face down beside his coffee, untouched. "They're calling everyone," he said without looking at me. "Yes," I replied calmly. "They're digging up things," he continued. "Old things." I poured myself a cup of tea. "That's what happens when the ground isn't solid," I said. "Things resurface." He finally looked at me. "You don't feel bad at all?" he asked. I thought carefully before answering. "I feel sad," I said, "but not guilty." That answer landed hard. By mid-morning, the house no longer felt like a home we shared. It felt like a place we were both passing through in opposite directions. Earl packed slowly, not angrily, not dramatically, just quietly, shirts folded, shoes placed in a box, papers stuffed into a bag without care. "You're really making me leave," he said. I shook my head. "No," I replied. "I'm choosing not to follow you anymore." He stopped packing. "That's the same thing," he muttered. "No," I said gently. "It is." When he left, there was no shouting. No last insult. No final apology. Just a door closing. And this time, I did not feel the urge to reopen it. In the days that followed, people reached out. Some with support. Some with shock. Some with questions they had no right to ask. I answered only the ones that mattered. I spoke to Evelyn again. I spoke to Martha. I spoke to my children. I did not speak to Earl. That chapter was done. One afternoon, my daughter came to sit with me on the porch. "I didn't know," she said softly. "I didn't see it." I reached for her hand. "Some things are hidden very carefully," I said. "That wasn't your fault." She swallowed hard. "I'm proud of you," she said. That sentence healed something in me I didn't know was still broken. The investigation continued, but I stopped measuring my life by it. For years, everything had revolved around Earl's moods, his secrets, his control. Even now, I refused to let the rest of my days orbit his consequences. I took walks again. I started writing, not evidence, not timelines, just thoughts. I laughed more. I slept better. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange and purple, I realized something important. Justice does not always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like freedom. Sometimes it looks like a woman standing in her own kitchen, breathing without fear, knowing she will never have to protect a lie again. Earl sent one last message weeks later. "I never thought you'd do this." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back. "Neither did I, but I'm glad I did." I blocked the number and felt no regret. As the months passed, the story slowly faded from headlines. But it did not fade from the people it mattered to. Evelyn told me she slept better now. Martha said she finally felt believed. And I felt like myself. Not the quiet wife. Not the careful woman. But the one who knew her worth, even if it took her a lifetime to say it out loud. If you are listening to this story and you feel that tightness in your chest, the one that says it's too late, I want you to hear this clearly. Time does not erase truth. And it is never too late to reclaim your life. I am Lorraine Maddox. My husband thought time erased his crimes. The next day, I rewound the evidence. But the most important thing I rewound was my future. Speech balloon, if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful grandma stories. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know who stood with me until the end.